and I learned that he was an informant. So I started extorting him for make about like $10,000 a week. You rarely even seen the police knock on anybody's door because back at that time, everybody was keeping their mouth shut. The community was airtight. They wasn't telling on each other like that. You couldn't get information out of them. There were literally no rats back then.
Ended up with a 27-year prison sentence there in the infamous Lorton Correctional Facility. So tell us about the murder conviction that sent you to Lorton. Were you innocent? Were you guilty? What happened? Okay, so welcome back to Mr. Nathaniel McQueen-El, Lorton legend, Washington, D.C. representative, and Moorish American. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, Al. How you doing?
Excellent. So we did an interview a couple weeks ago, talked about some pretty wild topics, some hot button stuff. And you have obviously you've lived a long life, done a lot of different kind of things. So we kind of did a little brief highlight reel, but we didn't go into kind of, who you are and where you came from and growing up. So let's go back in time and let's talk about
one minute. Before we begin, I'd like to respond to a couple of comments that were left in the comment box of interview 1 and 2.
Okay.
Several of the interviewers accused me of lying. And I just want to briefly address that because I know the truth, honestly, it needs no support. But I would like to say to my viewers that in those 2 interviews and in my book, The Hills of D.C., there are absolutely no lies, no hyperbole, no fluff information. You get this information straight from the horse's mouth. One of the viewers accused me of lying about Jeff Ford Bay. Now, here's what I have to say to that particular viewer. You can fact check what I said. Jeff Ford Bay, or Jeff Ford, whatever you want to call him, Angel, was in Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary with me. He came to me and to my close friend and brother, Raymond Smithfield, Cadillac, while we was on a rape pile. And he asked me, could he function under our leadership? That he was from Chicago and he knew a lot about the Moors and he always wanted to join the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, it would be senseless of me to tell that story with any type of lies because Jeff Ford Bay is still living and he's right up there in the ADX in Florence, Colorado.
With some guys you know, probably.
Yeah, I sent him a book, but they turned it around and sent it back to Amazon. So I just want the viewer to know that it was the DC Moors that brought him into the temple, that embraced him, and it was a DC Moor, Brother Ralph Walker Hill, that taught him his basic lessons. And it was Sister Christina Price Bay who gave him his tribal name of Bay, and it was me who issued him his nationality card. Now, I have no more to say about that. If brother don't believe that, contact Jeff Ford Bay and see what he has to say about it.
I'm sure there's a few people they could ask.
Yeah. Well, and then you could Google it. It tells you where he first embraced Moorish science. Was in Leavenworth.
Well, because he's written he's done some writing himself.
Of course he has. Now, one other comment, another comment was Italian, accused me of lying.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's not a whole lot I can say about that if you wasn't there, then you wouldn't know. But I will say that it was no exaggeration there. You know, you got people in the street that can be as vicious and as ruthless as anyone could be. Because they got what? They got that burner in their hand. But however, it's different circumstances when you're in the penitentiary. You got to know how to sling that knife in order to protect yourself.
And be willing to.
And that's where the Italians came up short. I make no mistake about it. I extorted them. I robbed them. I took their alcohol. I took their drugs. I took money from their gambling pools. And that's a fact. Not trying to toot my horn or make me look no different from who I was. I'm merely telling my story. One other comment I like to, before we begin. The homosexuality in the prison, in the BOP. Now, a lot of people, they listen, but they don't hear.
Oh, that's right.
I made it plain. I said that my homies that was over in the SHU, segregated housing unit, would send the homosexuals to me for protection. The operative word, protection. Now, if you're a homosexual and you have no other means of paying for that protection but to sell your body, then that's what it was all about. I was about surviving in there. I robbed, I extorted, and I protected them homosexuals. They was able to walk around the compound unmolested. They was able to walk around the compound. They wasn't being accosted. They wasn't being disrespected. And the only time I was basically seen with me, Carl Kelly, or David Asher Bay, who was my partners, the only time we were seen with them was when we was transacting business, when somebody wanted to sleep with them. This is how I survived. I don't promote no homosexuality. I was in the belly of the beast. The same type of circumstances existed in Lorton. But what was uniquely different was I was at home. I didn't have to rob. I didn't have to extort. I didn't have to sell, protect the homosexual. I created a safe haven down there in Lorton for a lot of homosexuals and a lot of potential inmates who were about to be break. You see what I'm saying? So I don't want to be noted in history as being the type of guy that was advantage taker, because I wasn't. I was just an exceptionally strong guy that if you stepped on my toe and you didn't say, excuse me, then I was going to either smack you, I was going to break your jaw, your nose, or I was going to put my knife in you. It was just that simple. That's how I was raised. That's how I lived. Now, one other thing before we begin. I want to make it clear that I never stated that I was a holy man or a saint. I stated that I was a Moorish American. That's my nationality. That doesn't make me a holy man. You got people that's Christians, you got people with all sorts of nationalities, all sorts of Sunnis. It don't mean that because they embrace that religion that they holier than thou, that they're a saint. I was struggling with my higher self and my lower self. What I can tell you is that at this point in my life, hey, I haven't committed a crime in over 30 years. I've been out here in the street almost 20 years. I rarely have a negative thought. I am a righteous man. I'm not doing these interviews to glorify my position or to defame anyone's position. I'm doing this interview because I'm on a mission to uplift fallen humanity. And it takes finance to do that. So in order for me to get finance, I got to let the viewers know the contents of my book, The Hills of DC. It's so much that you and I is getting ready to talk about. It's detailed, and so much we have already talked about is detailed in that book. They need to go to www.thehillsofdc.com if they want to know more. It's nothing but the truth in there. Thank you, Al, for letting me say that. You can go ahead with your interview now.
And one quick thing for those who don't know, to uplift fallen humanity is the mission of the Morris Science Temple of America, correct?
That's right. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go back to young NaeBall. How old were you? Well, let's even say, paint the picture of, so I do know Washington, D.C. was the first large city in the United States to become over 50% Black. So paint the picture for us of what, around what years you were born and what was it like there? I mean, I'm sure bad things, but also it would have been one of the very few places where Blacks had some degree of political and economic power. So what was your childhood like and how did you springboard into crime?
Well, I was born on Capitol Hill. That's why the name of my book is The Hills of DC.
That's a neighborhood?
Yeah, Capitol Hill is the largest residential neighborhood in DC. And at that time, DC was known as Chocolate City. Now, I got involved in crime. I maybe was like 8 years old. I probably was about 6 years old when I first started going to school, when I became involved in gang activity.
Was DC segregated, heavily segregated? Were you,
no.
did you, no?
It was Chocolate City because you didn't even see Europeans walking the streets. Only time
and this is by what? This is the late 50s? Late 50s?
Yeah, the late 50s. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the late 50s. The only time you seen a European when it was a truant officer knocking on your door. You rarely even seen the police knock on anybody's door because back at that time, everybody was keeping their mouth shut. The community was airtight. They wasn't telling on each other like that. You couldn't get information out of. If you were known to be a rat, then you was ostracized from the community. You see what I'm saying? So it was literally no rats back then. And I came, so to speak, off the porch when I was 8 years old because my family was poor, but when my grandmother died and my grandfather died, that created hardship for my mother. My mother, at that time, she had 4 boys, and my grandmother stayed with me, my grandfather stayed with me, my uncle stayed with me, my aunt stayed with me.
Oh, wow.
That's how it was. We was all grouped up together. We had a big old house, and we made ends meet. But we were still poor, but we wasn't on welfare, nothing like that. But after my parents died, my mother had to seek financial assistance from the government. You see? So I took it upon myself at 9 years old to start hustling. My first hustle was I should go steal the soda bottles from the back of the Safeways and stores and turn them in because you would get $5 off of the 2-liter glass soda bottles. 5 cents off of the 2 glass liter soda bottle. You get a couple cases on, well, you had a little bankroll. And then I went from there, I should go to all the fountains, Union Station, Library of Congress, Reflective Pool, Flower Garden, all those spots where they had wishing wells. They should wish, the tourists should come through and they would make their wish and they throw the silver dollars in there. And I was a good swimmer because I learned how to swim in the Anacostia River. So I should go in there, get in the pools, and get a little bankroll. And I go back and I get that money to my mother. most of the time, she wouldn't accept it. I had to find other ways, other means to give it to her because she knew I was out there doing something wrong to get that type of money. So my career started right there. I mean, I had a choice, but I didn't have a choice because, there was times my mother used to wake me up, and this was on a regular. She would wake me up 3 or 4 times out the week and send me to the Northeast Mission to pick up stale leftover donuts. And a lot of times that's all we had to eat. So I started like extorting. Extortion was something that came early in my life. I was starting a European. His family had, was well off. And he was one of my schoolmates. And I was starting a Chinese kid because his mother owned and father owned the laundry. And he had a paper route. So I was just starting them. That's how I first started to get my bankroll together to really help my family. That's where it all began with me at.
This is
and
about
all
age
that's
10.
detailed in my book.
And you were what, about 10 or 11 when you started the extortion?
Oh, I was like 9. Yeah, I was like 9 years old. And then at 10 years old, I got locked up. 10 years old, that's the first time I got locked up. They caught me stealing, I had stole about like 50 silver dollars out of the Union Station, out of the Capitol reflectors well. They're still there at the Capitol. And the officers chased me, ran me down. Then they locked me up. They let me go. And then I broke into a house not long after that. I'm not a house. My bad. I broke into a variety store not long after that. And the guys I was with, they was all older than me, but I was leading them. I never fought them right to this day. I still talk with a couple of them. They got caught because they didn't go home. I had advised them to go home, and they got caught. And they told on me. So this was the first time I got locked up, was in 1959. I got locked up for housebreaking. And then they charged me, also charged me with insurance for school because I wasn't going to school like I was supposed to. And they let me go. And I stayed out a couple of days. I didn't go to school. I elected to go here and get locked, go on down Maple Glen. And from there, that's where my criminal activities escalated. I went to the farm school down in Law Murray. It was called Maple Glen.
What was that like?
It was like
reform school can be worse than prison.
Yeah, it was a lot of rules down there, and the council was abusing a lot of the young juvenile delinquents, you see, because they was real aggressive, and some of the juvenile delinquents were equally aggressive, and they used to initiate us with these big wood slats right on our hind parts, as we go from cottage to cottage. And I got down there and I elected to go. I told my mother I wasn't going to school. And she said, the truant officer will be there to pick you up, when you come back. So I said, yeah, I'll be back in there, right after school. And I came back in there. They locked me up, took me down. I stayed down there one day, man. And it was snowing real bad down there. And I tried to escape. I said, no, I don't want to be down here because they threw me in a cell and they locked me up for 24 hours, for observation. So when they opened the door to feed us, me and a European, that came down there with me, he left with me. We escaped. We ran out there and escaped, and they ran us down in the woods in the snow, and brought me back. Then from there, I was all right. I adjusted. It was males, it was some females down there. It was mostly a male institution, but it was females down there too, and it was like a camp. We went hiking You know, we had to go to school. It was mandatory for us to go to school. You know, and I learned a lot down. I learned how to play basketball, you know, football. You know, I already knew how to play baseball. I already knew how to box. You know, learned that out in the streets of Washington, D.C.
Okay, so we'll leave them to go to your book, The Hills of D.C., to take you from 10 up until your federal prison term. And last time we talked mainly about what you did, adventures or misadventures in federal prison. But you got out of federal prison in the late 70s, and you weren't out long, and you ended up with a 27-year prison sentence there in the infamous Lorton Correctional Facility. So tell us about the murder conviction that sent you to Lorton. Were you innocent? Were you guilty? What happened?
Yeah, I was innocent, believe it or not, but I wasn't innocent to the extent where what happened to me bent me out of shape in any way, because I was living that lifestyle, and the same guy that I wound up getting charged for killing him, I was extorting. See,
who was he?
He was a guy by the name of Ralph. They just called him Gangster Ralph. He was in Lewisburg with me, and I knew that he was fearful of me. And once I learned that he was an informant,
he was a drug dealer.
Yeah, I seen him. I saw him waving at the DEA undercover, and they waved and smiled. And he waved back, and I was watching them at that particular time with a pair of binoculars because I was trying to figure out who I was going to start uptown, because my partner had gotten busted with our drugs and got locked up, and our finances had depleted. So I went back into knowing what I do best. I went back into extort stuff. I'm going to go uptown and I'm going to extort me some of these hustlers, you know, where I can keep on living on the level that I was living. So I was watching him, and I learned that he was an informant. So I started extorting him for about like $10,000 a week. He was pulling down some nice money. He was selling like 200 quarters every day for $100 a quarter. And you do the math, that's about like $20,000 a day. So I was hitting him maybe like for just 10 a week. And he had tried to put some people on me. So I pistol whooped him, and I threatened the people that he tried to put on me, because the people he tried to put on me was a dope fiend. And I didn't take him serious. He used to be a gangster, you know, and I put him in check. And so I sent my brother and a friend of mine that was one of my soldiers down in Petersburg that stabbed a couple people for me and was extorting the tags for me under my orders. So I sent them up there to his apartment to pick up my money, you know. And one thing led to another. They wound up killing the guy by accident because he ran up on them and they got into a tussle. And my pistol went off. It was a hand trigger. Shot him in the back of the head. He died. And they came looking for me. And they found my brother's fingerprint there. So he ran. I turned myself in because I know I wasn't in the apartment. I've never been in the apartment. So my fingerprints weren't there, and couldn't nobody place me there, and couldn't nobody ever say they seen me in the apartment building, which was the Woodner Hotel. So I wound up going to trial, and during trial, I tried to save my brother because I had alibi witnesses and everything, hostile witness, you know, and it didn't work out. You know, I was in the kangaroo court.
They were out there. What do you think they kind of were like, we got to get this, we want to get him off the street?
Oh, there's no question about it. They wanted the prosecutor. He was disenchanted that I was even back out on the street because
disenchanted. That's a good word.
Everybody who had escaped from the jail, I made it back to the street. I was the first one to come back to the street, and he was wondering how did he get back to the street. Him and them gangsters left out of the jail he's supposed to still be locked up. He had a bank robbery charge, and plus we gave him 5 years consecutive sentence for the escape. So they wanted me off the street. So the witness said that she didn't see nothing and she didn't hear nothing, but they got her to change the statement to she seen my brother and she heard my voice. And they gave me 27 years of life for that. And they sent me down Lorton.